Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and what an honor it is to bring in a cat who is always looking to stretch the boundaries of music that has form or no form, maybe has meter or no meter, but regardless of the genre, the way he uses his apparatus, the sousaphone and the tuba, is I dare say that I've not really ever encountered anybody that has used it like this. And I know that cats like Spike Lee's father, Bill Lee, was a tuba player. There were other cats who used the tuba as a bass, but to see this cat manipulate the apparatus, become part of the conversation, and drive the sonic nature of the music is remarkable. And it's cats like my guest that I gravitate to because they're not into a formula trip. They're not playing the greatest hits. They're not playing cover music. They're striving for original, creative, authentic vibration that is going to inspire people to be themselves. And quite honestly, that is what my show has been about, and I've dedicated my life purpose to. John Altieri, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Beautiful, man. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to finally connect.
Absolutely. It's an honor. Can you talk about, did you have cats that you looked up to? I mean, when I say musicians that were doing something that you were sort of carrying the torch on. I mean, I've never really. It was. I mean, Stuart Bogey said it best. He's like Altieri's a superhero. So I'm just trying to figure out like who were your elders in terms of the sousaphone and the tuba.
Let's see. I think harkening back several decades ago, I think Howard Johnson.
Rest in peace, my dear friend. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Had an early influence because of his work outside of genres that the tuba and sousaphone found itself in by tradition. So I was looking towards him for that. I also had inspiration from some of the New Orleans bands who found unique ways to mic the sousaphone and to articulate with the sousaphone to really make it feel like a bass. So there was influence there. And I think also just stepping out into my own composers that I enjoyed listening to and improvisers I enjoyed listening to have it kind of inform, sound worlds that I wanted to create in. So definitely Howard Johnson and the New Orleans Cats, and also Nat McIntosh, who was out of Colorado but from Wisconsin in terms of his scene.
Well, what is he? Is he our peer? Because I know Ken McIntyre. That dude he ran the jazz music studies program at Old Westbury, but I'm not sure if there's any relation there.
I don't think so. No, Nat McIntosh is in his 40s. And he had a real special sound with Young Blood Brass Band, where he played like such fire, and I think it really inspired a lot of people my age as well. He was a contemporary, it's someone that we aspired to kind of play like. And I gotta say, one thing that happened also, I don't know, some people don't talk about it enough, but Hurricane Katrina, pretty much shut down New Orleans and sent all those bands just around the country trying to play elsewhere. And it really proliferated that New Orleans sound and the use of that instrument. And in the wake of that kind of diaspora of New Orleans across the country because of the hurricane and what it did to their venues down there, brass bands started popping up everywhere, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, such that the Roots started using it on national TV, such that, John Baptiste put one in there on his show when he got, on the Colbert Show. So there was no other instrument had a renaissance, at least in the past 15 years, like the tuba did. So it's kind of interesting and then of course, I was lucky enough to do the David Byrne tour. I'm glad that he got to hear me play, and
Yeah.
and part of his vision for that instrument was to not only have me like play in a section, but I was like the bass player for all the Talking Head stuff, all the stuff he did with St. Vincent, and her songs as well. So it was a unique kind of position to hold down a full-on rock show with that instrument.
Dude, that is, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just not hip. I knew you collaborated with him, but I wasn't aware that you were playing the bass lines in those shows.
Yeah, yeah, for
Oh
sure. You go
my God.
check out. So I was sitting on This Must Be the Place, like circular breathing that whole time. And then I was, using electroharmonics pedals that I mounted on the instrument that I had like rig a customized battery for so that I could play with octaves, so I can play with some distortion, so I could play with some synth and trigger because we're all moving around. Like, just like I know a lot of people love the American Utopia tour,
Hmm.
which incredible culmination of his vision and Annie Parsons' vision, the choreographer. But we were doing the same thing back in 12 and 13 and 14 on that tour. And it's beautiful to see the culmination of it in American Utopia. But we were moving around on stage just as this tour was, and to be able to do that, I had to just mount the pedal on my instrument. I velcroed it right on, and that was a solution that we came up with for that.
Um, there's a lot of stuff in my head here. Going back to the original New Orleans Jazz Cats, what did they do to mic the sousaphone to make it sound, or the tuba to make it sound like more like would it be like more like a Fender bass or like an upright bass?
More like an electric bass for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
How'd they do that, or best as you can? No,
It came down to mic placement, to be honest.
well, that's always what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So like a lot of people, I think, in my opinion, mistakenly mic the sousaphone from a distance because they think, oh, it's such a loud instrument and so on and so forth. But what the bell, that flare of that bell does, it really gives a lot of extra like nodes and like barbs to the sound,
Mm.
not outdoors. So it ends up always in the studio, not capturing the true core of the tone. So people got closer and closer to the bell, and the New Orleans guys literally to put it down the bell.
They
And
put
like
it down the bell.
yeah, so when you're looking at someone's on a New Orleans stage playing, you look at the sousaphone, you literally see the cord of the mic disappear into the bell, and and that just creates this beautiful low end for days, and like they sit on that, and
Oh my God, chops! I mean, it's like Chuck Rainey or something, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
unreal, dude.
yeah, it's a great inspiration.
Um, John, I like when were you ear trained before you learned to read music? I find that in talking to some cats that have moved into the academy, like
Hmm.
Gary Bartz and people like that, people that are horn players, they talk about, basically their entire generation grew up, they heard the music first before they learned to read it. They could play a tune in every key. Their ears were huge.
Yeah,
Younger cats, just because we're inundated with visual material, and quite frankly, a lot of that visual material is incredibly mediocre.
right.
They're learning to read the music before they can really hear it. So Gary said, therefore, their ears are locked, and that's why you have this homogenization of sound, or it's very hard to tell who people are when they're soloing certain instruments. And I just wonder, I mean, with you, you're already really on your own path, but did you learn to hear music before you learned to read it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But the reading was definitely introduced alongside at some point.
Mm,
My dad's a musician as well. I can get into that for a second.
please.
But prior to that, the idea, I think one thing that music educators, a few decades ago at this point, started to understand. I think there was um, this wonderful book by this ethnomusicologist. His name is John Blacking,
Mm,
and he wrote a book back in the 70s, I think, called How Musical is Man. And it pretty much was based on his studies going to Africa and studying the role of music in certain communities and realizing and making the parallels through his studies there that when music is taught as a language, to have it parallel how language is learned resulted in some of the more musical um, communities. Like, and like How Musical is Man, I think his ultimate result is that music, like we are innately musical, and it just how much it's brought out of us at an early age will depend how musical we'll be
I dig,
as
man. I totally dig.
so
Hmm.
with that said, like to correlate learning an instrument and sound and rhythm and pitch to the way we learn a language makes a really great course towards that ear training and that comprehension that we're looking for. So the way, kids will start to hear sounds around them and imitate them. There's not, you're not handing a 5 month old a book, right? You're talking to them
Right.
and they're picking up sounds, and they start to make gibberish that soon turns into words, that soon turns into sentences that you then can communicate with. So like no one is introduced, they don't even start reading till well after they, understand the language, and can speak some words
That's right.
for themselves. So the later that the notation can be introduced, at least in those early years, like the better the ears get to a comprehension level. So those are really cool discoveries. I think music educators have been working with for decades now, and I think it's a great thing. So there was
Talk a little bit about how you were in, like how your I mean your dad was a pro, so like how did he introduce ear training? I'm just like obsessed with cat. I just want everyone to just be obsessed with ear training, not throw the book away. Like I understand that it's really important to learn to read because you can get gigs and it helps you pay the bills and stuff. But
right, right.
I just want like I am just so interested in just learn, like being able to hear. I mean, I just interviewed Dash Crofts yesterday from Seals and Crofts, and I mean,
Cool.
he's totally, and you know what, and I think you can agree with this. I mean, you can play more instruments when you learn by ear. He's never learned to read music. I just
Mm-hmm.
wonder about how your dad introduced ear training, and then alongside, if you can give an example of how he introduced reading music, and maybe with a wink and a nod to say you don't always have to read the notes exactly the way they are on the page.
Mm-hmm. So interesting. Yeah. I think one thing is my dad's a trumpet player and a band director here in the Bronx. I'm from North Bronx, right in
Wow.
Pelham Parkway, Pelham, right at the border of the Bronx, where I was born and raised. And he taught there and was a tri-state area trumpet player and band leader in the Catskill Mountains, the whole hotel chain up
Are
there in the
you kidding me? Back in the 60s?
60s, 70s,
That is
80s.
so on, dude.
Yeah.
That is so
Yeah.
hip. Go ahead.
Yeah. So he has some wonderful stories from,
I got to talk to that cat immediately, dude.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's
Um,
gonna go down. Yeah, that's sick.
so he, had this incredible exposure to the uprise of salsa in the Bronx and
Mm-hmm.
Latin music, and then of course the Jewish music in the hotel, the Borscht Belt. How he and his exposure to that, just also through the wedding scenes and so on and so forth. It's really interesting, stylistic array that he had to have, and of course, just from that era, he was also in the Army jazz band. Like he played in the Army band for years.
Oh my, dude. Just for the audience. I mean, you had the Palladium was in full swing. Tito Puente was in full swing.
Yeah.
Machito was in full swing. Then you had Stan Getz going up to that Borscht. All the jazzers were going up to the
Yeah,
Catskills to play gigs. I mean, your dad was right in it. What was it? What instrument did he play?
he was a trumpet player.
Oh my God! And he was in the Army band.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a full plate, man.
Got old 78s. I got old 78s of him taking solos,
Oh
and it's so
God.
breathtaking to hear. It's a beautiful sound. With
Was
that
it like in
warm,
a? Was it like in a like sort of a bebop kind of bag or like post bop? What were they playing? I mean, what kind of
yeah, they were coming more out of the swing era
Right,
still when he was
right.
with them. So he had this really warm Harry James kind of
I
sound.
dig it, man.
And then that of course changed over the coming decades. But at the time in the 50s, where the recordings I have of him with the Army band are more steeped in that swing era and that warm kind of Harry James sound. So that's what I grew up in that, right? I had that sound around the house and that kind of presence of music in the home. My older sister sang, I had a step brother who played some piano. So there was definitely around the house creating that environment, like we were saying, with that back to that ethnomusicologist, like how like the community creates this kind of
The language, yeah.
creates the language around. So we would tap rhythms out, or like sing patterns, like tonic and dominant patterns, just to kind of like speaking basic sentences, like the ball is red. I
Yeah,
want to go
I
to the
love it.
store. So that's what tonic and dominant patterns are. This kind of understanding of how harmony functions. And that gets your ear, associated with how that's going to go down. And then from there, putting that onto the page, so associating that with the page is important. And like I guess one thing that's so cool, I think that people forget, because music these days that's written, it's so micromanaged. Everything in the score has an articulation, a dynamic, a
Exactly.
tempo,
Yep.
and it's like, if you're a studio person, you got to go in, you play what's on the page, and sure, you get paid, and you'll come get called again. So that's one aspect of being in command of your instrument. But I love, people forget, for centuries when music was written down, it wasn't written with all that. It was just honestly notes documented, like Bach, for instance,
Totally.
and now people have to navigate their own way amongst those nuances, amongst the tempo that'll fluctuate, amongst the expressivity or the articulation or how they want to play. So for centuries, it wasn't so hyper managed, and you're allowed to jump off the page and become yourself, through someone else's,
But no,
doc.
you're nailing this, Altieri, because it's like, I mean, I have to ask you. I mean, already you're obviously you have the ability to really articulate this stuff so beautifully verbally. But I just wonder how much of how staunch you are in terms of, because what you're talking about is leaving it up, putting out the chord charts or whatever, and then leaving the interpretation up to the individual person itself to do their
Mhm.
own thing. And I just wonder, like, when you talk about people that go in, they get they get paid, they get called back. Have you just are you pretty staunch in needing to have some kind of creative control in the projects that you're in? Have you turned down gigs that are just basically like, you know, that where you just feel constricted because the artist, I mean, there's always that fine line between I forget what Julian Priester told me, but just being a true artist, what does that really mean? Have you are you somebody that desires some kind of, not everything, but some kind of creative control, and have you walked away from lucrative stuff because it's just a formula trip?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do, of course, I prioritize those projects where I have, an artistic say in them, or like I have an investment in, like, my
Right.
creativity is a part of the end result. For sure, those are beautiful places to be, because not only are you tapping into the skill sets you have on the instrument, but also your creative spirit, and your soul that you can inject and let it meet with the other people that are involved. That's the beautiful part of it all, right? When that happens. So there's that. I also I love trying to strive for the command of my instrument, such that when someone puts something in front of me that is insanely challenging, or takes me out of my comfort zone, or will have a strong vision for what it should sound like, I like the idea of meeting that and
Hmm.
seeing if, and at least for a little while, I haven't had long-term relations with that kind of setting. They're usually short-term, right? For recording session, or for a particular show, or like whatever kind of,
I dig.
you
So it's
know,
it's more like it's like sort. I don't want to say conquering it, but it's getting it like you said. It's getting your mastering that, and then that's enough. You don't need to do it anymore after that.
yeah, 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 for sure. And sometimes they're also not long, they're not lengthy engagements as it is. They're like, come in, play on this film and for today, and then, or let's learn, we got this concert coming up this weekend. Here's two rehearsals, and it's got to sound like this, it's got to sound like this, and then I'm done. And then I get paid for the weekend, and I don't have that anymore in my life.
Right, but you walk away with some bread, and it's a good gig. I mean, I think that's fantastic. I wonder in your travels, like you know, I just want to believe that everybody has the same kind of uh, ethos or sort of individualism that you do. Um, do you think that, like, it's kind of a hard question coming out of COVID because things are so Swiss cheesed and inconsistent and just sort of trying to come back. But by and large, like, do you come in contact with musicians who, ultimately they're able to sing for their supper because they're doing something, they're part of some sort of unit or product, but they're actually like spiritually void or miserable because they're just kind of mailing it in, or they can't really truly express their soul. To me, like, that is the magic of the musicians. I get off more on the musicians than the music sometimes because I just like to see the soul come out. And but I just wonder if it, in my own little bubble, is it as big a crisis as I think it is, that people can't really. There's a lot of people in the racket or in music today that can't truly express their soul. Right.
Yeah, it's definitely out there. It's definitely out there. And it's not constant though. Some people, I guess everything's in fluctuation, everything's fluid. Like some days, even in projects that I love and I have been with for a long time, some days, I'm just missing the cylinders or not quite right in the headspace. And I'll be like, and the show will go by and no one else might know, or maybe one in the band might be able to tell. But, and that's just a bad day or something. Then 2 nights later, bam, it's totally the opposite. And I'm there and everything's just incredible and magical. So no individual, I think, will ever have the constancy of always being soulful and in the moment. And also said for the others, I think, to be said for the others that might really find a hard time finding it, I think they will find it at times. You know what I mean? It's not black or white. I guess.
Right. No, totally. I want people to feel liberated. We have a game. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't necessarily think you're going to know who this is, but just pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay.
Spiritual thing is basically when you're playing, and it's just not bebop. This is other music too, but bebop in jazz is probably. That's the high end of what we do as jazz musicians. But just the spirituality comes from it's like something. Now this may sound abstract, but it's something that Wayne Shorter said to me one time. He said that the only way you can really, really, really play is that you have to go to the store and buy some milk for your grandmother. When he said that to me and the drummer Omar Hakim, now he had a few drinks, a few old drinks. Right. I said, "Wow!" But a couple days later, it hit me, because, it's like to come if you have one of those kind of families. You go to see your grandmother. She says, "Go to the store and get me some milk," and you go there. There's a love. There's a love for something other than just what you're looking at. It's like your own personal love, which could come from God, which could come from the force of life. It could be whatever it is that you think makes you tick. Mm-hmm. That if you tap into that, whatever that is, it's not a material. It's not the instrument. It's not the notes. It's the life force. And that is very, when you operate on that band. That's or on that frequency in life. That is very spiritual.
Yeah.
Mr. Altieri, you want to take a gander at who that is? I can tell you he's a bass player.
Oh, I don't recognize the name. I'm sorry, I don't recognize the
voice. Yeah, no, there's no. That was my first interview with Stanley Clarke, and
great.
And I want to go to this thing that Wayne Shorter was talking about, where it's beyond the physical realm. Like, to play spiritual music, regardless of the genre, he said it's like going to the store to get your grandma some milk. And it's this like higher level, higher frequency. And I just wanted you to talk about a band, a unit that you've been in the past, where you can sort of like talk about that devotion. So much, the music was so intoxicating that it did not, the drama didn't deter from it. Even off nights didn't deter from it. It was truly about, just like that feeling, that I don't want to say obligation, but that love that you would do anything for someone like that if you had one of those families like your grandma. Can you relate that in your own musical life?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the comment is spot on and so beautifully placed. I love it. It's like
Yeah.
puts you right in the right mode to understand what that is. Yeah, that's why we're doing this, right? That's why I wake up every day to like
Exactly.
to find that moment. And if I'm lucky enough, I can with whatever I might be doing that day, musically. And I'm blessed to have found those moments with people in front of audiences or in small rehearsal rooms, whatever it may be. That's the contagious part. That's the beautiful part. That's when we get to there, when it's that spiritual connection or that depth of moment. Those I just cherish, and I feel truly blessed to partake in those moments. Are you asking me to?
Yeah, I mean, I mean that, like something. Can you like personalize it, like, or maybe an early memory of like maybe not even realizing what it was, but
Mm,
being part of this. I just would like to say it would be like improvising together. I mean, a lot of cats musically, Schofield told me this. He's like, a lot of blues and rock players, they don't want to, they're not interested in improvising together. They have a set chords, the set songs, and that's what they play. But
right.
the idea of like where you maybe you weren't even like hip to the wisdom of it, but you early on when you recognize that. I mean, there's only two letters that separate magic and music. I'm just wondering if there was like a unit that or some memory that you have specifically that can sort of encapsulate that.
Yeah. Perhaps. I mean, there's a couple that are coming to mind right now. I guess I can share them. These moments usually relate to these kind of like epiphanies in life, or these more monumental learning or
Yes.
points. When I was a teenager and I was composing music and writing a lot, exploring the language in that way. I lost a friend. We were 16. He died of cancer, and he was a close friend since childhood. And we used to climb up on this like church rooftop in North Bronx to kind of look out into the marsh to see if we could see like the Orchard Beach,
Mm.
East River,
Mm.
and from up there. So like we did that all the time. And like when he passed, when I was able to finally get a hold of myself, more like by 17 or 18, I started to write music that captured that sensation of being on that roof with him, posthumously trying to write music that would capture the joy of being up there and the beauty of that expansive kind of view,
Hmm.
also with this foreshadowing of his tragic early death. So putting myself in this place, I quickly went to this kind of spiritual place that was magical to me, because it was also cathartic to hear, to put together chords and sounds and orchestrate instruments to capture whatever it was that was welling up inside me at the time. So that was an early kind of
Was that
realization.
by the way? Did that get recorded at all? I mean, anything on record with that?
Yeah, I do. I conducted. It was for orchestra, actually. So I conducted an
Wow.
orchestra of. I have it up on Bandcamp somewhere.
I got to check that out. So it
Called
was you say it was like kind of a symphonic piece or what more?
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah. I went to the Eastman School of Music as undergrad, and I was able to continue to write a lot while I was there. And I was able to gather up some student friends and so on, and record and perform and conduct this 14-minute orchestra piece that I had written.
Oh my! See, that is the visceral burn and the trauma and being able to heal from that.
Yeah.
Did you? Speaking of Eastman, I mean, just because of, did you have when you went there, did you have a balance of being able to play live. Because I remember when I interviewed like Kenny Burrell, and we were talking about the Academy, and he was like, the jam set, this guy grew up in Detroit with Pepper Adams and Elvin, and these guys were basically listening to records and writing up their own tunes based off the records, and that was their Academy, and he he's like, those jam sessions now, they take place in the student union, or in the band room or something. And I think back to like Steve Gadd and the Gat Mangione and the Python room and all these excellent places that were up there. Did you have a couple of local watering holes that you would cook the groove at and get out of the four walls of the Academy?
Yeah, in Rochester, there weren't many. But house parties also
Definitely.
as that kind of scene. So we would go to certain, little house parties on weekends and have that opportunity as well. But you're very right to recognize the changing of that. It's a debatable, whether the pros and cons have so many sides to what happened. Like what you're describing, at least what I think you're describing, is how jazz music or improvised music was a life force. It still is, but began in America as this
Absolutely.
music.
It dictated our culture in many ways.
Exactly. And and then soon thereafter, people started to commodify it and package it and put it into universities, right?
That's right.
And you can major in this art form that began, on a square in New Orleans, and now it's a packaged degree for $100,000, right?
That's right. Can you? I mean, that's the question for Altieri is: can you really codify a street language? Anyway, we're going back to Africa again, but the floor is yours.
And this is the major question, and this is a great question, and people, probably could present good arguments for both sides. I think I lean towards, gosh, I don't know which way I lean, but it's a little suspect, right? It's a little
absolutely no. There is both. I'm just saying, like I'll just I when I interviewed Billy Childs, the piano player, he is a professor at Berkeley, and like I'm really glad that the old guard has a chance to work at these universities. But he was very open about the challenges as it relates to what is out there for somebody after this package of $100,000 and you get a degree in this right. language. And I transcribed it, I put it up on Facebook as I do, and it started to generate a lot of interest. People liked it, and he was like, he's like, he wanted me to take it down because he didn't want to bite the hand that feeds him. So if the reality is that if the cats that were raised on the bandstand by guys like J.J. Johnson and Freddie Hubbard can't really speak authentically about the issues, right. then we're really not going to get anywhere. You know what I'm trying to say? It's really kind of a conundrum for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not trying to bag on the Academy because I just know that back in '69, when it was known as the Schillinger House, now Berkeley School of Music, Charlie Mariano would come off the road and it was like a trade school. He was an already established musician, and maybe he wanted to kick a drug habit or, fine tune a new instrument, and then he'd get back on the road. Well, and that speaks to just the domestic touring circuit. So there were a lot of gigs. I wonder about you, and maybe your advice to younger cats. Did you have to create your own opportunities to get stuff out of your system live? Because you just the four walls are only going to do so much, and pretty soon they're going to start coming in on you.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the unfortunate, like the Academy can have both those sides. Like it depends on who's teaching and what totally. Kind of environment you foster. That really makes a difference because unfortunately, there's so many people that are graduating from these places and have been for decades with these degrees in jazz or in contemporary studies, or improvisation, or in classical music too, whatever else is degreeable. And now there's all this whole workforce out there, but there's not enough jobs.
Totally.
So the creative ones can hack their own way into a new path, and that works out great. But a lot of people end up, oh shoot, I've got nothing to do. I can't find anything to do. Let me go get another degree. And so they go back having never gained that road experience or that true club or venue experience. And they start teaching people without that experience, having it for themselves. So now you're creating that, and then they get a doctorate, and then they go teach somewhere. And now you've created this whole vicious cycle of people without experience teaching people that want experience.
Altieri is. You're just on. This is. You just articulated it. That's the point. How the heck are you going to have any growth when you have people with degrees that have no street scholar experience? Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So that shows up in the sounds, how they're playing patterns, how you're lacking that soul that you talk of, that spirit, that finding that depth of human, condition. There's no condition.
Well, it's accessing the primordial gut. That's where how do you get that can't be taught in the academy.
Yeah, and a sterile campus is not going to provide that.
No.
So
how did you navigate that? Can you talk about how you? I feel like you've cut your way with a machete out of the woods once in a while.
Yeah, I really have. I could look back through those paths and see, wow, I really had to force this one out of nowhere. Especially as a tuba player, especially because it's just like when you're a tuba player going into Eastman, you're taught, okay, there's orchestra jobs and there's military band jobs, and that's it or something. So I really had to be like, well, I don't fit into either of those places. So it's a matter of finding my community, the like-minded people that were hearing things I wanted to hear, that were thinking and just being in an open space, in a patient space to allow things to grow, and working hard every day. Once you're able to find those friends that you can partake in those soulful explorations with, then it really helps to stay sane, to stay at it, to stay diligent, and to stay believing that things can happen. So those are definitely important.
I'm curious about. Do you actually have a cartage company at all for your instruments? I mean, are you able? Do you have to? I remember Katz talking about. Like in the 70s, having to bring their Fender Rhodes to the gigs, and they'd have to hold it on their backs, and it was really cumbersome. And then Hal Blaine in LA finally was the first guy to have cartage for his drums. Do you have to? I mean, can you just talk about your ability to get to a gig? I mean, especially if it's those are. I mean, that sousaphone is huge, man.
Yeah, it is. And it comes apart, so it's a little more compact.
So you have like a case, or how do you do you bring it yourself? It's
yeah, exactly. So, gosh, on the David Byrne tour, there was a whole crew that took care of that.
Beautiful.
Which was beautiful. I could just show up. It was stage side and it was ready to go. So that was luxurious in terms of as luxurious as it gets for a tuba player, right? And also when I toured with Macklemore, I did the hype horn section for Macklemore arena shows, and that was also, there was people there to take care of that during that tour. So the higher end you go with in terms of production, there's people that will cart that instrument for you. But there are just gig bags and flight cases that I have to wheel through airports. And sometimes if I know I have certain one-offs, for a weekend, we're flying somewhere and it's just the one show for the weekend or something, I will try and backline the sousaphone so I can show up and it'll be there. I won't have to travel with it.
Interesting.
And so the people on that end will go rent or borrow a good sousaphone on the other end. I also have a small community of people. If I know I'm going to New Orleans and I don't want to bring my horn, I could, I have friends there and so on and so forth. But most of the times it's me with this big old flight case wheeling through, an airport.
Well, also you hope that it's a quality sousaphone. You don't know what kind of dog du jour might be awaiting you when you backline it,
Right. Exactly.
I'm curious. I mean, I'm always interested in this, have you been in bands where no trap drummer, where you've been having to hold it down yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Have you been in bands like that?
Yeah, I mean, as the functioning bass player, you mean?
Yeah, basically, yeah, where there was no trap drummer. I mean, you know what it is excuse me, it was you go back and listen to drummerless trios in the jazz context with Jimmy Jufree, Steve Swallow, Paul Bley. There's no drummer. So Swallow's holding it down. And I just wonder, can you talk about how was that a challenge for you, and like what kind of context you were able to just like play without be the main rhythm player without a trap drummer?
Yeah, I have not done that too much. Most of the time, I am in a rhythm section with a drummer, but I have done it some, and it's definitely, taking the reins even more so rhythmically and pitch and like, harmonically.
What kind of
It's
instrumentation was like in the example in the times that you have? What kind of music was it, and what was the instrumentation?
it was kind of like just like pop music or contemporary kind of classical music, actually.
Interesting.
Also,
Wow.
so like it was just a matter of playing lines that are more rhythmic so that the pulse is more apparent and your articulation is really at the front, like the front of every note has a definitive start, in terms of how I'm placing my tongue and the syllable I'm using to start each note. You got to be really more on top of those aspects of it, I guess. And also just harmonically, just to make sure you're implying, the roots of whatever structure you're using, harmonically.
Do
Maybe
you
that.
do like? I saw John Altieri. Um, COVID was already well underway, even though we weren't aware of it in our national consciousness. In January 2020, I got to see Stuart Bogey, big
Yeah,
band, at the Brooklyn Bowl, and it was stunning. And
yeah,
you came across it, talking about the cyclical nature. Now, again, Joe Russo was playing drums, but I really felt like a. Have you been influenced a lot by, I guess, what they call Afrobeat music, Fela Kuti music? And I know some of Stewart's music lends
yeah.
itself to that, but I just was feeling like there were times you'd get into these trance grooves where it was like it just felt like Fela. I was wondering if that kind of music has had an impact on you.
Absolutely, for sure. When I moved back to New York City after my undergrad degree and master's degree, and I was here, Antibalas was in full swing. They were
That's right.
pretty getting pretty popular, and obviously Stewart was a founding member of that band. One of the original members there. So, and I had other friends that were involved with that at the time. Jordan McLean, Chris Vadalaro, Eric Biondo.
Hmm.
And so I was exposed to being in clubs, being at venues, hearing Antibalas bring Fela's music to Brooklyn in a very authentic way, yet a very original way. They were writing originals in the style of Fela, right? And Mayo was at leading the band in front as a kind of like a Fela figure. So that was my first real exposure to live Fela music, and I was learning so much by listening to them play and how the bass was used as this trance dance kind of function. And obviously Stewart's music now has journeyed from that, but there's still such influence, right? There's still such influence in, like you said, like you heard that
Oh man, it was so. I mean, the flavors were. That's interesting because you're totally right. Antibalas was the forerunner, but still, some of those grooves, it was like, and it was
yeah,
you, man. It was coming from the rhythm section. It
yeah,
was
yeah.
right there.
I mean, playing with Joe was absolute dream.
Yeah,
Such a
it's a monster
musical.
rhythm section. It was just unbelievable. I walked out. I mean, that was the last show I think I saw for 2 years. I was healed for weeks, so not months, but I mean, it was just like I
Yeah.
did not know what had just taken place.
Yeah, it's a truly incredible project to be a part of. Stewart, I mean, it's just a culmination for him in so many ways. He worked so hard on that music and like so much of his compositional language. If I've known his compositional language for 20 years, so like to see it kind of little things he's always did done come together in that music. The way he pyramids, the ensemble in terms of presenting chords and just the unique original melodies that he finds, and his large scale forms that he uses. These, just so breathtaking and exciting to be in rehearsal with and to be in the recording studio with and to work with him. He's truly, uh, I just so creative. And then, so on top of that, then I'm playing with Joe Russo, who is this hears it all. He nurtures every beat and nudges everything and knows exactly where everything needs to be. It's pretty stunning to make music with. So I learn a lot from playing and feeling music with him as well. And it's very it's a very spiritual place to be amidst Stewart's music, making it with Joe, and of course that cast of mind blowing talents.
Oh, it's, you know, can you talk? I just feel like going back to what we talked about before with the Academy. Eddie Henderson told me, that was the other problem, is that before you could go out, and there were farm systems almost, like where you'd go into Art Blakey's band and, look who came out of there. It was Bobby Timmons and Cedar Walton and Freddie Hubbard and Wayne Shorter. And so, but they were all apprenticing for months, if not years, in these bands. And then they went on to become leaders of their own. Now you have situations now where, whether it's in the Academy or even in bands, you have people that are at the top of the food chain as leaders, and they've had no experience. And I just wonder, as a leader in your own right, and so it's a kind of a two-part question, like who was one of the best leaders you ever worked for? And then in your own point of view, like, what are the characteristics of leadership that you try to bring that you think are most effective? I just think there's a vapid quality to leadership now, mainly because cats that are being appointed leaders have had no experience. And so I'm curious about who you thought was maybe one of the best leaders you worked for, and then some of the sort of nuances that you try to bring when you are at the head of it all.
Yeah, it's a great question. I love it. So much to think about. I mean, when I think of leaders that I played for, obviously the first one that comes to mind is Sonny Jane, leader of Red Barats. I'm an original member of Red Barat, which has been around for 12 years. It's like a Northern India meets American dance party, and it's been popular. We've toured the world a bunch, and for the past 12 years, and I'm the functioning bass player of that project.
Wow, that's hip.
Sonny Jane.
What made them an effective lead? What was inspiring? What kept you going?
I love Sonny. Is a combination of vision and communication and listening. So he has a vision for what he wants, but he's open for those that are part of the band to put a piece of themselves in each song and compositionally and so on. And the dialogue was so important. Dialogue makes me feel, invested artistically. So that was important, and to know that I'm being listened to from a leader. I think those things that Sonny really captures so well, and just the work ethic, like how he hustled and continues to hustle for that band, for it's getting its voice out there. We continue to travel and present our stuff to the world. So it's been a great 12 years playing with him. He comes to mind, and of course, John Baptiste.
Absolutely,
I've played on the Colbert Show for his house band a good dozen times, and various other gigs, outside in the world with him. And he's just also someone who has incredible ears, hears everything, knows what he wants, but achieves it with a chill and with an excitement and a spirit that is just undeniably authentic and from joy and from the music making. Talk about someone who can go to that spiritual place. Like I've been on stage with him a few times, and it's just been magical, for sure.
That's beautiful. I mean, because I just was hanging with Greg Arico, who's Sly's original drummer, and he said that he wasn't that hip to Batiste, but he saw him in some capacity. I don't know if it was live or not, but he's like, he was channeling Sly's whole vibe, that what you just described. It's this ability to be passionate and to be inventive and creative, but then also communicate that and then continue to hustle and then treat everybody else like a human being. That's really a jug. Are you leading projects, and how comfortable are you as a leader?
I love leading projects. I I do have an EP of a sextet that's out.
Interesting.
I have led various other kind of short purpose, like okay, I want to put this piece on, and I'll gather up the people and lead the rehearsals and make this project or this event happen. I've done stuff like that over the years. So that's my capacity, and I love it. I wish I had more of those opportunities.
They're
But
coming, man. I think they're I mean, life is,
yeah, yeah.
knock on wood. I mean, is it something you even like? What's on your bucket list at this point? Like, I mean, you've done, you're playing all this like incredible. I mean, I actually consider it fusion. You're fusing all this music. It's world music and all these different styles. And but
Yeah,
is there something that you're Jones? I mean, it's funny when you talk to the older guard. Nobody saw the COVID coming, and I think everybody kind of just figured, well, I can do whatever I want when I want to do it, and then that was all taken away. So they have these little
Right.
projects now. They're all jonesing. Is there anything on the bucket list for Altieri right now?
Yeah, well, I like how you're talking about fusion because I think we're entering this kind of post-genre place, and I think it's
Totally, dude.
real important, like with the ease of which we can all listen to music from across the planet, and there's so much of it out there that's accessible now. It's like the idea of keeping music categorized and in these little compartments is just no longer accurate or no longer purposeful. Like maybe it made sense decades ago when we were trying to organize the music into an industry, and so people could make money off it. It probably made
Absolutely,
sense to a lot of people, but
absolutely.
it's no longer definitely. Well, some people could argue that it was never a good thing, and definitely now it's not. So I'm hoping that the more these fused sounds get out there, and that we can do away with some of these genres and these categories. So I like where that's going, and I totally agree with that. And in terms of bucket list, yeah, I think sometimes, well, what happens to me as a sousaphone player, as a tuba player, I definitely got you know cornered into that. Like it's something I do very well. I mean, and I love doing. And I got this call to the next call to the next call, and so sooner or later you realize all these years passed, and you've gotten known as this tuba player that did this tour and this band and this so on and so forth. And you look back, you're like, wow, these are all amazing opportunities and blessed experiences. But what about me? What
Hmm.
about where's my voice and all other than the voice I have as a creative presence on all these projects? Where's that composition I did when I was 18 for my deceased friend? Like where's that place for
I
me?
dig. I dig.
I gotta go back to that well and to that zone and hear my sounds. So
Yeah,
what's
because I
next?
think I think that you're, not everybody falls into this sort of, but like you found, like you said, you have to go seek those creative people, and I do think that you're a healer, and I think that if you can find, I mean, it has to be authentic, and you have to feel it, but I think that your healing capacities will be even unquantifiable when you're doing stuff that is completely true to your own nature. I mean, I think that I just want to go back because you articulated it. When people realized that they could make money, when we had a record-based commerce industry, people would go into a Woolworths or a Five and Dime, and you'd find a Blackwood Brothers record, and then behind that it was a Gary Bartz record. Like there were no genres, so then people felt
Right.
this need to have to like categorize stuff. And I just like I agree with you. I think you said post-genre world that we're in now, and I really dig that. But is it like? I absolutely agree with you because it's not functional. But do you think that there's, I know this is not your, necessarily your wheelhouse, but
Right.
do you think, how do we, I don't want to say commodify because I hate that crap, but how do we get people paid for this stuff? Because if it is post genre, in this sort of corporatized world structure economy that we live in, they're like, well, what kind of music do you play? And unfortunately, the Duke Ellington model of it's all music has really taken a back seat, and I just wonder how you get to the next step of actually not just acknowledging that we're in a post-genre world, but actually cats that can tour playing that kind of music and get paid for it.
Right. Yeah, that's a
And
great
that might
question.
be there may be no answer to that. To me, it's like you were waxing poetic on that, and it's
Yeah.
totally legit. And yet, because the Bill Grahams of the world were geniuses. They're like, well, that's the point, Altieri. Is like Bill Graham's philosophy, Lee Morgan, Miles Davis, those guys were like, listen, you don't know what this is. You don't know this music, but you're gonna dig it. I want you to dig it. Even if you don't, we're still gonna play it. You have to be hipped. You have to be introduced to it. It's not about placating to an audience. I don't want to go see John Denver play, or regurgitate the hits. But now, it's like sort of like there's become this placating to the audience when in fact what's gotten lost is if the musicians aren't getting off, then the audience isn't going to get off. So the musicians have to play what they want to play. And the audience will get hip to it. They'll like it.
Exactly.
And I don't know why that we've gotten so far away. The bean counters are so, entrenched there. I just, to me, like that to me is the ultimate challenge. Obviously, you've been in projects. I guess it just takes brilliant fucking people that can, excuse my language, that can do 8 different things because as a musician today, you are responsible for so many things that are not part of the artistic development itself,
Exactly. That is a tough truth pill to swallow because you have to do all those things.
I just want to see it in our lifetime, that would be
I know, exactly. The people, the smart people, at least that are smart right now, are straddling that line, are putting a foot in both worlds, being able to talk about and describe their music so that the industry can swallow it and sell it to the rest of the world. And at the same time, while they say that, with one side of the mouth, they can still, with the other side of the mouth, pursue their sound as they are getting excited by, even if they realize it's not fitting into the genre, or when it's live, it's going to maybe start there and go somewhere else, or and the audience is going to go with them. They know they will. But
exactly. Just trust in that. I got one more voice for you, man, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
Well, love to me is what makes everything go around. I think that love created the universe. I think that if you say you do not believe in God, you're an atheist or whatever, I respect that. I think we all need to respect how each other feels about things in life. But for you to say that you don't believe in God, and if you have a little daughter or a little son, and you look in their eyes, you can't tell me that you don't believe in love. Mm-hmm. And to me, God is love. So I don't think I need to go any further with that as far as that's concerned. And I also believe that and especially at this time in the world, what's going on out there in the world, it's just insane. And we need to hold on to love. We need to hold on to what love is. We need to realize that there's a heavy struggle going on in the world, and I don't think any of us really understand. We don't understand it like we should. But I know one thing for sure, that this world needs love. It always did. Jackie DeShannon said
it. Brother Altieri, that was my first interview with a person who's become a dear friend, is Jim Keltner, the drummer. And, I wanted to ask you about how your daughter has changed how it's opened your consciousness and your soul to be even more yourself as a person and a musician.
So interesting. First of all, I love that. I love that.
These guys are poets, man. It's unreal. I mean, it's just I'm intoxicated with how these are like the musicians are the last authentic people around, man. They're not, it's insane.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to jump off from, for sure. And gosh, having a child is so special to me, and I respect all people's decisions to have or not have.
No, I mean, I just want to say my daughters have helped me just be they grounded me,
Yeah, for sure. It's a love that was like, I guess other loves I've had in life are learned. Yeah. Like you meet people, and through progress and process with that person, you grow up to love them, you fall in love, or but with her, it was this immediate like growth within my body. Like suddenly, once when I first saw her and touched her, like all my insides like moved to the side, and something new grew
Yeah.
within my body, that like a fast forward, like a time lapse video of a plant growing. It's right, like
Absolutely, man.
Jack and the Beanstalk kind of thing in my core of my torso. And that was this unconditional, immediate love for this being that had a heartbeat, and was breathing in my arms. So that really is, I can't really explain it any further. That's something I'm still.
No, actually constitutionally you grow, like I dig it. And that doesn't even include like carrying them around, like physically getting bigger, muscle. You're just talking about like the inner life force got bigger.
Yeah, exactly. So it is,
And they know you so well. I mean, how has she shaped your? I mean, how has she helped you just sort of become when you're hung up about something? Has she helped you hang up your hang-ups more? I mean, I don't know. My kids have just they are my teachers, man, and I feel like
How old are they?
16 and 10, and it's like I look at their generation and I'm like, God, I hope something's left for them, because I do feel like they're pretty brilliant, their generation, and I just don't want the boomers to screw it up too much,
Yeah. I'm excited for her in some ways, though. Like,
How old is your daughter?
she's 9.
9, yeah.
And barring that the world doesn't, you know,
Yeah.
close shop because of aerial diseases and
Nuclear holocausts and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
all the apocalyptic things, dystopian things. Hopefully, if those things, stay away, I do feel excited for her generation, because they've grown up with, it's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day. For instance, like I was just thinking about all the marches and protests that have been such a part of how people gather their voice together to speak up. And she's like, it's innate, or it's like embedded in her since age 3 or 4. She's seen, women marches,
Totally.
gather, speak up for equality. She's seen Black Lives Matter protests and speak for all this injustice. So like, and I think it's just like and it's like, if it happened when I was a kid, A, it didn't happen as much. B, if it wasn't covered by the news, I would never know.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So now it's just that all that stuff's being documented, and is charging that generation. It's injecting her generation to, I think, to take control of their fate in a lot of ways. So I'm excited for that potential, I think. But yeah, she's 9, and it's
Let me just tell you something. I just want to be because, and I know you know this already, but I'm telling you, like she's still kind of young, but once they get to like my older daughter's a sophomore, and it's like, holy crap, they're almost out of that. They're almost gone. Like they're almost on their own. It goes so damn fast.
Right.
It's so fast, man. So I just, my only thing is like, treasure every moment. I know you. I mean, we all are imperfect, and we try to be the best, parents we can be, whatever. But it's just, to me, it's absolutely a vital part of existence. And I don't, anybody can do whatever they want, but I just feel like it's being a parent and having really kids, like you said, that are super aware and super vigilant and super brilliant. It just makes everything that much, much more rich. Before I let you go, just can you talk about any upcoming gigs? I want to go see Altieri cook the groove a little bit. I mean, it's Pollyannish to think that you're coming to Arizona, but you got anything on the books anywhere?
Yeah. Let's see. Soon coming up. A highlight of the coming weeks is going to be May 15th. There's some other things before that, but May 15th at La Poisson Rouge.
Yes.
Red Barat. We're doing a bill with Son Rompe Pera, which is this band from Mexico.
Whoa.
And they're like punk cumbia. So,
Yeah.
and they have mallets in their band.
I love it.
Like So they're a really cool band to be paired with, and of course Red Barat. We're gonna do our thing, and that's something on the horizon. I'm excited about coming up. So I would check out that.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and I'm hoping that maybe coming off this transmission, that maybe you'll be inspired to come up with something, an Altieri geared project, and start to drive that primordial gut again.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I hope to. And this has been a fun hour to hang and chat. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, man, always good. We'll do it again, man.
Yeah,
All right,
sounds
be
good.
cool, bro.
I'll see you around.
Peace, man.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Well, it's just a long time coming, but worth the wait. Amazing sousaphone tuba player John Altieri, finding a way to stretch vocabulary and stay inspired in a very dystopic time. But we live on through our kids and through the rhythms and vibration of love. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show.